All right, meteorologist Jamey Singleton waiting on, let's see, confirmation that I am indeed streaming. It looks like I am. To I don't know how many different platforms now. I've got a service now that sends us out to Facebook and Twitter, and trying a new also dimension here so you can see a little bit better what is on my screen. So hopefully this helps me out, helps you out as well. Looking at Dorian right now, and I want to tell you that we're really looking at a more powerful system, I think, than we realized this time 24 hours ago. I did notice yesterday across the Leeward Windward Islands that we did see some indications of a inner core, a bit of an eye wall or eye feature yesterday on the radar presentation. I was reluctant to pass that along, but I should have, because it turns out Dorian today became a hurricane, and it was only forecast to become a tropical storm through its entirety. So we are looking at a hurricane of 80 miles per hour. That's a minimal hurricane, but listen, all indications are this is going to undergo some strengthening up to a Category 2, up to a Category 3 storm by the time it nears the Bahamas and Florida over the next couple of days. That puts it at about 115 miles an hour, and that's when you start, once you get to Category 2 and 3, you start to see some damage out there. So this is concerning, and also the track is a bit more concerning, especially for the East Coast, because I don't know if this is going to directly just go into the Gulf and stay in the Gulf. It's looking more and more like it could either stall over the southeast United States or perhaps get picked up in a weakness and move up the coast as we go into next week. But regardless, for Labor Day weekend, it's not looking good for Florida or the Bahamas. And again, all interest from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the East Coast need to watch this storm very, very carefully. All right, so we don't want to underplay or overplay a situation. But I think up to this point, up till today, Dorian was under forecast, and that's not to put any fault on anybody. It's just the way tropical systems go sometimes. I will tell you that from my experience, tropical systems tend to have a trick or two up their sleeves. We learned that with Michael last year, so we need to pay careful attention to Dorian. This is the radar presentation from San Juan, Puerto Rico. San Juan right here at the bottom of your screen. And you're looking at a fairly ragged eye wall structure right now. You know, these things tend to undergo cycles where the eye wall will build, and then it'll move in concentric circles, and we'll see a new one kind of develop. So by no stretch of the imagination is this another Maria. In fact, Puerto Rico was spared the majority of the damage today. The U.S. Virgin Islands, however, St. Thomas was hit hard with nearly 100 mile per hour winds at one point today for a brief period. And we had a few, and we're still dealing with some flash flooding concerns, although most of the rain now has moved north of Puerto Rico. Of course, they're still recovering from Maria. I want to send you back here to the home. This is from my Gibson Ridge software, and I want to kind of give you a perspective here. This is Dorian. This is Aaron, or what's left of Aaron here in the Atlantic Ocean. That's not expected to be a big deal. But again, watching Dorian here, and this is Puerto Rico, and you can see the Bahamas right here, and this is Florida, of course. By the way, some coastal flooding occurring from the new moon. That's occurring out there with the lunar cycle. But anyway, back here at home, look at all this yellow moving in. I want to also concentrate on local weather. We had a front move through the area today. Very minimal precipitation because we've got this long wave trough over the eastern United States. It's kept us a bit cooler than normal. We didn't have the clouds holding us down into the 70s today. We made it to about 86, or right at 86 in Roanoke officially for the high temperature, but some very dry air building in. And that's the good news I have for you, is that it's clear outside right now. I'm looking out the window at the studio here in Redwood. We are clear, and overnight low temperatures tonight are going to fall back down into the 50s, even the lower and middle 50s out across the countryside. So it's going to be a gorgeous, crisp great sleeping weather, kind of a fall night tonight with the frontal passage now to our east. Most of the rainfall is to the north, out across the northeastern United States. But moving back out here, you can see how the tropics bear watching. And a lot of times this time of the year, it's deceptive because here in the lower 48, we start to get the influence this time of the year of more Canadian air, yet the tropics do start to heat up. And that's why you can get those perceptions that the tropics aren't that bad and we don't have anything to worry about, when in fact things can change on you in a real quick hurry. So let me pop up my presentation here, and we'll go from the beginning and start you out with that dry air moving in. Now this is the WRAP model, which shows you I'm loading here the moisture at about 5,000 feet, but it gives you a good idea that we are shoving some of that moist air off to the south and to the east of the area. So you're looking at the greens and some of the whites and even the browns. That's the dry air that's building into the area for not only tonight, but for tomorrow. And we stay in a very dry pattern going into your Labor Day weekend. So that's the good news. There's a bit of a front there you see toward the end of the loop there across Ohio and Pennsylvania. I'm not worried about that. That's some moisture in the mid-levels, but no more than just partly cloudy skies at best. Mainly just a dry forecast from this point forward, with lows in the 50s and maybe around 60 and high temperatures in the 80s. Here's Dorian. Winds of 80 miles an hour. It's moving to the northwest at 14 miles per hour. So to get your bearings, this is Puerto Rico here. And they were spared again today. The Virgin Islands are right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse very well or not. But some flare-up of convection to the north of this, undergoing a little bit of a southerly push. That means from the south to the north aloft. So it's being sheared a little bit, some dry air being circulated into the center, but not a lot of dry air. It's a formidable storm, no doubt. And it continues moving again northwest at about 13 miles per hour. The NAM model at 18Z, every 6 hours we get these updates, now picking up on Dorian's path, and you can see it here as we go into motion. Back here at home, you can see Smith Mountain Lake, that little dot there. We've got high pressure in control, and again a couple of nights where it's going to be very cool, very almost chilly, and not a lot of precipitation, as the Gulf of Mexico for right now is closed for business. Dorian there moving to the north and to the west, and eventually affecting the Bahamas toward the end of this loop, which takes us into the weekend. Courtesy of Lee Cowan of Tropical Tidbits, we've got an intensity forecast on Dorian, and right now there's two factors that we look at, well, all the time with tropical systems, two main factors: wind shear and sea surface temperatures. And both of those are favorable for intensification with this storm. So if you were looking at this 24 hours ago, you said, okay, yeah, tropical storm nearing Florida. Actually, if you don't have anything to hinder the development, these tropical systems can, again, sneak up and they can bite you sometimes. So the models today have been honing in on the fact that we do think that we're going to go to Category 2, Category 3, and even on the top end of the range, although not a lot of models show this, you're looking at Category 4 there in purple. But a lot of the models take it into that major Category 3 status here, which would indicate winds of, again, 115 plus miles an hour. That's maximum sustained winds. Keep in mind you got higher gusts there, and the majority of them too, a vast majority of them going through Category 2 over the next 24 to 72 hours. So that's something the Hurricane Center's watching, and I'm watching there as well. Now, this is a spaghetti plot, and again, we eat a lot of spaghetti in the tropical season, because we look at different basically different versions of the same model to account for inherent error. We don't sample the air perfectly, so we tweak the model just a little bit up and down just to see if we can get some kind of a semblance to what the upper level pattern will look like over the next few days. You can see here as we put this into motion, Virginia's right here. What we look for and what tropical systems do is they will move toward the area of least resistance. And with time, we have a ridge that continues over the four corners. That's a clockwise area of high pressure. And we have a ridge that builds to the north and eventually to the east of Dorian, we think, with time. So where does that put us next week? Well, that puts the southeast into weakness. And it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that there's a overall there in the black. This is the average of all the different models off the GFS. We call that the GEFS, and you can see that over the southeast there's the weakness. So really anywhere from Texas all the way from Florida would be in that weakness. And at the surface, this is at the jet stream level, at the surface what you have a potential of doing is either stalling the system out or moving it up the eastern seaboard. And my gut feeling tells me there's a decent chance that this moves up the east coast. And it's not a certainty, but that's my gut feeling, either that or it stalls over the southeast and rains out over, Alabama, Mississippi, or Georgia, even into the Carolinas, and possibly affecting our area in the next week. That would be next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we need to watch this system, obviously, very carefully. This is the control run, the main European model. We were looking at the American model earlier, but very similar, okay? So we feel confident this moves across the Bahamas, moves across, or at least threatens Florida. You're looking at the oranger colors here showing us the two areas of high pressure. And we deal with this a lot nowadays. It seems that we have tropical systems that get stuck, like Harvey, and hopefully this isn't anywhere close to a Harvey, but in terms of a synoptic or a jet stream fill, we've got these two areas of high pressure that surround the storm. So it ends up in this null where it just kind of sits, at least on the computer model output. So the main jet stream up to the north, and then you've got high pressure to the east and high pressure to the west. Again, the area of least resistance would lie potentially anywhere from Florida up into the Carolinas, Georgia, and the southeast. So this is a system that could very well get into the Gulf and then get picked up a little bit to the northeast. And any little change in that could vary our forecast as we go into next week. So the bottom line is, if you have any plans for Labor Day weekend in Florida, especially in the Gulf Coast and all the way up to South Carolina, you need to watch this very carefully because especially for the week ahead, this is bound to change. Changed a lot today. This is the average of all the European, again, the ensembles. You have a band, you have an ensemble of all these different instruments. We do the same thing with models, and we take an average of that off the European. And the weakness there, obviously, is in Florida. This is, I think, at 192 hours. So this puts us into early next week. And you see it kind of sitting there. So you've got this big dome of high pressure over Kansas and Oklahoma. You've also got it over the building to the east of the storm. My concern is if there's, well, actually, we could use some of this moisture, but you can also see the weakness that develops through the Carolinas into Virginia here. So there is the potential that some of this moisture rides north as early as Tuesday and going into Wednesday of next week from Dorian. Regardless of intensity, regardless of wind speed, here we worry about more in the way of moisture. We also have access to hurricane models that will follow the storm along a grid, and that's what you're looking at here. I would point out that, and sometimes these intensity forecasts can be a little bit off, but I was just talking about the moisture. We don't want to forget about our neighbors to the south, and if you're watching me nationally or regionally, of course in Florida, it's a big concern with intensity, and a lot of forecasters and myself included are getting a little bit worried about the millibars here. You go from 966 to 958 to 940. 940 is a pretty powerful hurricane. And again, there's really not much in here unless we get dry air in the center of the storm. As long as we protect a pouch to the very center of the storm, I don't see any reason why this won't intensify a little bit more. So that Category 3 forecast from the Hurricane Center could end up being more conservative. And I don't want to raise any serious alarm bells, but I think from, Central Florida into Orlando, even inland areas, we'll have to watch this as it scoots along. So it starts out more of a northwesterly, maintains that northwesterly course through the next day or two, and then we think it jogs back to the west, northwest, or even to the west, and it could make a beeline toward Florida, as some of our more powerful hurricanes have done, like Andrew. That could be a potentially devastating situation. Not to say that's going to happen, but it's not out of the realm of possibility based on the data that we're seeing. And speaking of that, this is no official forecast at all. Again, we eat a lot of spaghetti this time of the year. These are the different models that we look at, and you can see they're fairly consistent through the northern Bahamas here at about 72, about 3 to 4 days out. Again, that puts us through the weekend. And then, of course, anybody vacationing for Labor Day in Florida, or anybody living in Florida for that matter, needs to watch this very carefully. But notice we've got a few runs here that take it into Georgia, even up the east coast of the Carolinas here, and then quite a few of them stalling it out over the southeast or going into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you just look at the GEFS from this afternoon, you also see a very similar pattern at 72 to 96 hours going into the Bahamas. But then beyond that, there's a huge spread here. I will mention to you that for our area, there's a potential that it scoots up the East Coast into next week. That would be bad news for Myrtle Beach, Cape Hatteras, Wilmington, North Carolina, places like that. For our area, usually when a storm gets into the Gulf of Mexico, they find their way into our area. So based on the, what I'm seeing here, if it does maintain more of a westerly track, and regardless of intensity, if it could possibly get picked up by the jet stream, move very slowly in from the Gulf. And of course, it's not always a bad thing when you get tropical moisture this time of the year. A lot of areas are still dry, but I would caution you to watch out for next week, Tuesday through Thursday. So here's the official Weather Prediction Center forecast, and we've again got high pressure in the meantime, nothing to worry about here at home or in Florida. Just a few scattered showers and storms at front that move through today. For tomorrow evening is parked to our south. So with high pressure in control, our winds will be very light. It's going to feel great outside. It really is. I think some areas are going to be down around 51, 52. Pulaski, Reiner, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Roanoke Valley, Lynchburg, Southside could easily be down around 56 or 55 by the time you wake up tomorrow morning. We could repeat that again for Thursday night. In the meantime, we'd have nothing but sunshine in place here. Again, the jet stream here is moving out of the northwest. You've got that weak front coming through late Friday, but again, very limited moisture, so no precipitation forecast. We're looking at dry weather. Front here stalled to our south. You've got some moisture building off to the west, and again, that's part of what's going to form this weakness, all this energy off to the west. There's an awful lot of that. What that will do at the jet stream level is kind of settle down here across the southeast, and you'll see that reflected on the forecast here from the Weather Prediction Center, our colleagues there. Saturday, Sunday, okay, you start to see Dorian here, and again, it could be a major hurricane by this point. You've got a stalled front across our area, but again, very limited moisture, so mainly just a dry forecast. A couple of isolated showers or storms Sunday from that feature, but again, by and large, the tropical moisture is off to the south of the area. And again, this is the National Hurricane Center forecast as we go into Sunday into early Monday morning. This is, I think, Monday at 8 a.m. Don't concentrate on the center of this. We talked with Ken Graham from the National Hurricane Center. He's the director. We talked to him, I believe it was in May, at the Roanoke Regional Airport when they were in town, and you saw that on Cable 12 as well as on Facebook here. You know, he emphasized the fact that you can get tropical impacts up and down the coast when you get a storm like this. So not always or never really the case, unless you have a really compact storm, do we see the effects just concentrated to the center. A lot of the attention, unfortunately, gets placed on the center of the storm, but you have far-reaching impacts hundreds of miles away from the center. So keep that in mind as we go through the maps here. Now, as we go into Monday, Tuesday, and the Wednesday, you see that system Dorian here stalling or potentially stalling into Georgia, into Florida as well. It could be in the Gulf. It could ride up the coast. We just don't know at this point. But fair to say that I think Tuesday in the southeast, it's going to be very tropical. We're looking at probably some hurricane-like conditions for somebody from South Carolina, I'd say the Florida, to as far west as Mississippi. Depends on the exact track right now. But we do need to watch this very carefully, because beyond this, especially if it gets into the Gulf, we could see it get picked up by this front here across the Great Lakes and move a bit closer into our area. I think I've got up a bit of a better forecast, or at least a better look at the cone here off my WSV3 software. Again, we mentioned the front that's been moving through the area today, and you can see here, let me see if I can get the official forecast track up here. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see the center of it right there. If I put on the active systems, I was looking for my actual points. Looks like they have disappeared. But again, this is the National Hurricane Center official forecast track. We will get an update. I think my points disappeared because of the 8 p.m. advisory off the system, which came in as I was live. But again, moving north of Puerto Rico, and then again, you're making that turn to the left, and then the cone widens with time as we go through 72 to 96 hours as we go into early next week. So again, that would include all of Florida. And this is just, again, for the center of the storm. You know, you could easily have a center over Jacksonville and effects as far north as Jacksonville, North Carolina. With a cone like this, you could also have vice versa. You'd have the center over Miami, and you could have impacts down across Cuba. So keep in mind the cone is a wide range forecast. So really, you take off the official forecast anywhere in here, you're looking at a possible eye or center. Again, forecast of 115 to 125 mile per hour sustained winds would produce a lot of wind damage, a lot of storm surge, and then you worry about the tropical moisture settling in here. Anytime you see a cone that gets circular at the end, that's also an indication of forward speed diminishing, or at least going downhill and perhaps stalling. So that's the Hurricane Center's way of saying, I believe personally, that there's a chance this could slow down, and I think it could stall somewhere over the southeast. Again, that would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Beyond that, yeah, Thursday. Wouldn't count that out of the realm of possibility. So need to watch this very carefully up and down the East Coast and the eastern Gulf of Mexico as well. A lot of players, as they always are in tropical systems. So watching it again very, very closely. So again, not ruling out impacts here in Southwest Virginia, South Central Virginia from Dorian. And again, the intensity of Dorian concerns me. It really got up there today. It doesn't have much to stop it from becoming stronger, and the Hurricane Center has reflected that in their forecast. And since we're live, what I'm going to do, there's another look at the radar. Looks like the eye looks a little bit better. Let's see if the winds have changed with this. We've still got Aaron out there as well. I don't have another cone. I don't think I'm going to get another cone until 11 o'clock this evening. Let's see. Still at 80 miles an hour, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour. These are the wind speed probabilities I think you're looking at tropical storm wind probabilities, and they have increased dramatically up to about 70 to 80% for Florida going into Monday, between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Monday. So as early as late Sunday night into early Monday in Florida, we should begin feeling the outer fringes of Dorian. And again, it could be a major hurricane at that point. You would see those outer feeder bands producing potentially some very squally weather and some severe weather. And again, you have to worry about tornadoes in a system like this too. We don't want to forget about that. So the key messages, excuse me there, my throat's a bit dry from all the allergies here. I'll point up I'll pull up the water vapor here, and I'll read you some of the key messages that the National Hurricane Center has out with the system here with Dorian. Let's see. Dangerous winds are going to continue in the Virgin Islands. Yeah, but the center's off to the north here, but we still want to watch out in the U.S. Virgin Islands, portions of Puerto Rico over the next few hours. And honestly, conditions are improving in that area as we speak. Dangerous storm surge, hurricane force winds later this week and this weekend continues to increase. The threat of that increasing again for central, northwestern Bahamas and along the Florida East Coast, although it's too soon to determine where the hazards will occur. So people in this area, and I'm quoting here, should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place. We tell you that every hurricane season, not focus on the exact track of Dorian Center, but rather the fact that you can get effects well away from the center. Heavy rains expected to occur over the Bahamas, Florida, and elsewhere. This is important wording here. Elsewhere in the southeastern United States later this week into early next week. Again, this is an important weekend for a lot of folks. We take off for Labor Day, and we vacation near the coast, but we've got a hurricane coming our way in the southeastern United States, especially in Florida, but elsewhere potentially into early next week. That's your update for right now. I'll continue to update you on this tomorrow and as we get closer into the weekend on the progress of Dorian and our weather here locally. In the meantime, enjoy tonight. Clear skies and lows in the 50s. Going to feel nice out there over the next couple of days. Enjoy that.